Episode 5, The Arrival of Rei, the Irresistible Monster, Part 2. Scene 1. The Moroboshi household lay wrapped in complete silence. Moonlight barely filtered into the room. The only sound was the gentle snoring of someone lost in a deep, peaceful sleep. But Ataru wasn't a high school student anymore. He was a tiny mouse, a skinny little gray mouse, and absolutely starving. His tiny stomach growled loudly. Carefully, he peeked his head out through a small hole in the wall. He glanced left, then right. Everything seemed quiet. Slowly, he crept out. Padding across the kitchen floor, his little nose twitched as it followed the irresistible scent of food. Then he saw her. On the far side of the kitchen stood a beautiful little white mouse. It was Shinobu. She smiled sweetly, holding an enormous slice of cheese in her tiny paws. Ataru's eyes sparkled. He happily scampered toward her. The little mouse smiled and reached out with the cheese. But suddenly, swish! A gigantic paw slammed down right in front of him. Ataru leaped backward in terror. From atop the refrigerator, an enormous yellow cat with black stripes slowly descended. Its massive fangs gleamed beneath the moonlight. Its long tail swayed lazily from side to side. Its eyes never left the tiny mouse. It was Lum. The giant cat licked her whiskers, flashed a mischievous grin, and began stalking him. Ataru swallowed hard. "You again?" With a loud meow, the Karu bolted. He darted between chair legs, sprang onto a cooking pot, slipped beneath the table, then raced across a shelf. The enormous cat chased him playfully, as though every second of the hunt was pure entertainment. Each swipe of her paw landed only inches behind his tail. "Help!" Ataru ran desperately from one corner of the kitchen to the next. Finally, he reached a dead end. There was nowhere left to run. The giant cat slowly advanced, revealing her razor-sharp fangs. Her huge eyes glittered with hungry delight. Ataru trembled. "And no, I don't want to end up as cat food." The enormous paw slowly rose higher, higher, until it completely overshadowed the tiny mouse. Ataru squeezed his eyes shut. The paw came crashing down. Thud! Ataru's eyes flew open. He wasn't a mouse anymore. He was himself again. He had just been launched straight into the bedroom wall. It took him a few seconds to understand what had happened. Rei was still fast asleep. While rolling over in his dreams, he had accidentally delivered a monstrous kick that sent Ataru flying off the futon. Now Rei occupied nearly the entire bed, hugging the blanket with a blissful smile while snoring peacefully. Rubbing his aching back, Ataru slowly sat up. He glanced at the clock. 4 o'clock in the morning. Outside, everything was perfectly still. He let out a long, exhausted sigh. What a night! I haven't slept a wink. Not even my dreams will leave me alone. Just then, his stomach growled so loudly that it shattered the silence of the house. And now I'm starving. What? Half Scene 2. The next morning didn't start much better. The first rays of sunlight had barely begun to shine through the windows of the Moroboshi house. From the kitchen drifted the mouth-watering aroma of a freshly prepared Japanese breakfast. Steamed rice, grilled fish, miso soup, eggs. On any other day, that smell would have put a smile on Ataru's face. Today, it only reminded him how hungry he'd gone to bed. Still half asleep and carrying enormous dark circles under his eyes, Ataru shuffled downstairs alongside his father. Both of them yawned at exactly the same time. They looked less like a father and son, and more like two survivors returning from a long, exhausting battle. But the moment they stepped into the dining room, they froze. Mrs. Moroboshi bustled cheerfully in and out of the kitchen carrying an enormous serving tray. She carefully placed it in front of Rei. "My dear Rei, you have to eat plenty. You're still growing after all." Rei smiled with that innocent expression of his, looking as though he barely understood what was happening. "Thank you." Without wasting a single second, he attacked the breakfast. Mrs. Moroboshi watched him with rosy cheeks and her hands clasped dreamily against her chest. She looked like a schoolgirl gazing at her favorite movie star. Oh my. What a handsome young man. Such wonderful manners. And those beautiful eyes. Ataru slowly turned toward his mother, then toward Rei, then back to his mother. "Mom?" She didn't even look away from the young Oni. "Yes, dear? What's wrong with you?" You look like you've fallen in love with him. Mrs. Moriboshi let out a bashful little giggle. Oh, Ataru, when someone is that charming, age doesn't matter. A chill ran down Ataru's spine. But he's practically my age. So what? Charm has no age. Mr. Moriboshi cleared his throat awkwardly. Peeking over the newspaper he pretended to be reading, he watched the scene unfold. He clenched his teeth, then quietly disappeared behind the paper again. Meanwhile, Mrs. Moriboshi was already heading back toward the kitchen. Ray, just wait a moment. The fish isn't ready yet. And I made more rice. I don't want you going hungry. Without pausing his meal, Ray simply raised one hand. Thank you. Ataru stared at the mountain of food continuing to grow in front of Ray. Then he looked down at the table. There wasn't a single thing in front of him. He glanced at his father. Nothing there either. Father and son slowly looked up at the same time. What about us? Mr. Moriboshi asked timidly. Mrs. Moriboshi answered without even turning around. You're both grown men. You can make something yourselves. Ray is still growing. Ataru nearly fell out of his chair. Growing? He's almost 6'5". His mother shot him a sharp glare. That's not Ray's fault. You're just a shrimp. The word struck Ataru like a bolt of lightning. Shrimp. The exact same nickname Lum always used to tease him. Slowly, he lowered his head in defeat. Beside him, Mr. Moriboshi folded up his newspaper with complete resignation. I suppose. I'll go make another cup of instant noodles, Ataru sighed. Make 2. Scene 3. A short while later, classes continued as usual at Tomobiki High School, or at least as close to usual as anything involving Mr. Onsen, the English teacher, could possibly be. Standing motionless before the blackboard, book open in his hands and wearing the exact same lifeless expression as always, he began the lesson. Repeat after me. This is a pen. The entire class answered in perfect unison. This is a pen. Without changing his expression in the slightest, Mr. Onsen repeated the sentence. This is a pen. The students, having long since surrendered to their fate, repeated it once again. This is a pen. Ataru could barely keep his eyes open. The dark circles beneath them told the story of another sleepless night. Every few seconds, his stomach growled. He hadn't eaten a real breakfast. Several rows ahead, Shinobu opened her lunchbox, neatly arranging the meal she'd planned to eat during recess. Ataru slowly lifted his head. His eyes locked onto a gigantic croquette. Then, a fluffy rolled omelet. And finally, a mouth-watering piece of fried chicken. The food practically shimmered, as though heaven itself were shining down upon it. Ataru swallowed. Grrr. His stomach growled again, ever so slowly. He stretched out his hand. Closer, closer, just a little farther. His fingertips were almost touching the lunchbox. Smack! Shinobu caught his wrist with astonishing speed. She twisted it sharply. Ow! The entire classroom turned to look. Without even glancing at him, Shinobu said coldly, Get your own food. I'm never feeding you again. She released his wrist. Ataru quietly returned to his seat, rubbing his aching hand with the defeated expression of a man who'd lost everything. From the row beside the window, Lum had watched the entire exchange. She covered her mouth with one hand and let out a soft, amused giggle. You deserve that, darling. Ataru shot her a resentful glare. This is your fault too? That tiny argument was enough to break the silence of the classroom. Mr. Onsen slowly lifted his eyes from the book. He looked at Ataru, then back at the book, and in the calmest voice imaginable, Moriboshi, disrupting my class again. Out into the hallway. Ataru slowly rose to his feet. But sir, I didn't even... The hallway. 5 seconds later, Ataru stood alone in the corridor, a bucket of water balanced on top of his head as punishment. He let out a long, miserable sigh. This is so unfair. At the ringing of the recess bell, students immediately poured into the hallways and schoolyard. Ataru set the bucket on the floor and headed straight for the main garden. There, as always, Lum was surrounded by a crowd of girls. Without even realizing it, she had become the most admired student at Tomobiki High. The other girls followed her everywhere. They listened eagerly to her stories, asked endless questions about Planet Oni, and laughed at everything she said. Ataru waited patiently until the group became distracted. Then he quietly walked over. Hey, Lum. She smiled warmly. What is it, darling? Keeping his voice low, Ataru asked, How much longer is Ray planning to stay? Why don't you convince him to go back to your planet? Lum burst into laughter. Convince him? She shook her head. Don't you understand yet? Ray does exactly whatever he wants. Nobody can order him around. Not even me. Ataru clenched his fists. But you're an Oni too. Lum laughed again. That's exactly why I know. His head is completely empty. You can explain something to him for hours, and he'll forget it before dinner. Ataru fell silent. He couldn't argue with that. After all, he knew Ray far too well. Just then, a burst of cheerful laughter caught his attention. He slowly turned his head. At the far end of the garden, Shinobu was chatting happily with several classmates. He's so tall and so elegant. Those beautiful blue eyes. He looks like a prince. Another girl sighed dreamily. I wish every boy at Tomobiki looked like him. Shinobu smiled. We're meeting him again at the park after school. The girls squealed with excitement. You're so lucky. How long is he staying? Shinobu shrugged. I don't know, but it looks like he's staying at Ataru's house. Another girl smiled. Maybe Moriboshi isn't so bad after all. For all his flaws, it was really nice of him to take Ray in. A vein throbbed across Ataru's forehead. He marched over indignantly. Nobody invited him. He just walked into my house. He's eating all my food. He stole my room. And my mother fell in love with him. But no one seemed to hear a word he said. The girls kept talking about Ray. As though Ataru wasn't even standing there, his shoulders slowly slumped. He looked up at the sky and let out a deep, hopeless sigh. Nobody understands my suffering. Scene 4 that afternoon. Ataru trudged slowly home. His hands were buried deep in his pockets. His head hung low. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His stomach was empty, and his pride felt even emptier. He let out a weary sigh. What a day. No breakfast, no lunch. Shinobu won't even talk to me anymore. My mother's in love with Ray. And Lum won't stop making fun of me. Just then, 4 figures stepped into the middle of the street. They lined up shoulder to shoulder, completely blocking his path. It was Megane, Perm, Chibi, and Kakugari. Ataru looked up with complete exhaustion. Now what do you guys want? I've already had enough of all of you. And everyone else. For one day. The 4 exchanged glances. Finally, Perm stepped forward. It was obvious he was speaking on behalf of the group. We've held a meeting. And we've reached a decision. Ataru raised an eyebrow. Oh yeah? And what's that? We're holding you responsible for Ray. Ataru's eyes flew wide open. What? Perm pointed an accusing finger straight at him. Ever since that guy showed up, every girl at Tomobiki has fallen for him. Chibi stepped forward. Yumiko doesn't even look at me anymore. Kakugari raised a furious hand. Keiko stopped returning my calls. Megane let out a dramatic sigh. Even the first-year girls won't stop talking about him. Perm clenched his fists. Every single one of them, every last one, only has eyes for Ray. Ataru threw both hands into the air. How is any of that my fault? Go talk to him. He moved into my house without asking. He's eating all my food. Even my mom fell for him. The 4 remained completely unmoved. Perm slowly shook his head. We don't care. He came here because of you, so you're the one who's going to get rid of him. Ataru instinctively took a step backward. Hey! I don't like the way this conversation is going. Perm gave a small signal with his hand. If you won't learn the easy way, you'll learn the hard way. Suddenly, from a nearby alley, a gigantic student wearing a professional wrestling mask emerged. He was one of the members of Lum's infamous torture club. Without saying a word, he grabbed Ataru from behind. Hey, wait! We can talk about this. Too late. The enormous student twisted Ataru like a soaking wet towel. The very next instant, the other 4 charged in. That one's for Ray. And this is for our girlfriends. And this is for every broken heart in Tomobiki. A massive cloud of dust swallowed the entire street. Inside it, only the sounds of punches, kicks, shouts, and the occasional flying shoe could be heard. A few moments later, silence. The boys calmly straightened their school uniforms. Perm looked down at Ataru, who was now flattened against the pavement. Remember this. This will happen every single day until Ray goes back to his planet. Without another word, the 5 boys casually walked away, as though nothing had happened. Ataru managed to lift one trembling hand. Why me? And from that day on, his nightmare had only just begun. While Ataru's life spiraled from one disaster to the next, Ray seemed to be enjoying the best days of his life. One afternoon, he could be seen strolling through the park hand in hand with Shinobu, sharing an enormous cotton candy. The next day, he wandered down the main street, eating an ice cream, surrounded by two smiling girls. Another day, an even larger crowd of admirers escorted him to the movies. Everywhere he went, the girls laughed, they chatted, they asked him endless questions, and Ray simply smiled with the same innocent expression he always wore. Sometimes he answered with a single word, "Okay." Other times, "Thanks." And whenever someone asked about Shinobu, he smiled softly. Shinobu. Pretty. The girls melted. Day after day, the crowd around Ray kept growing. And day after day, there were fewer and fewer boys standing beside those girls, from a safe distance, hidden behind a row of bushes. Ataru, Magain, Perm, Chibi, and Kakugari watched the scene with expressions of complete despair. Kakugari let out a long sigh. "It's unbelievable. He's just like Ataru, except successful." The others slowly nodded. Perm folded his arms. "He's a real Casanova." Chibi shook his head. "At this rate, we don't stand a chance." For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, every pair of eyes turned toward Ataru. Perm's voice became deadly serious. "It's all in your hands. If you know what's good for you, you'd better find a way to send Ray back to his planet." Ataru stared into the distance. There was Ray, surrounded by smiling faces, admiring girls, completely oblivious to the chaos he was causing. Ataru clenched his teeth. "Believe me, either Ray leaves, or I'm the one who's going to disappear from Tomobiki." From a safe distance, hidden behind a row of bushes, Ataru, Magain, Perm, Chibi, and Kakugari watched the scene with expressions of complete despair. Kakugari let out a long sigh. "It's unbelievable. He's just like Ataru, except successful." The others slowly nodded. Perm folded his arms. "He's a real Casanova." Chibi shook his head. "At this rate, we don't stand a chance." For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, every pair of eyes turned toward Ataru. Perm's voice became deadly serious. "It's all in your hands. If you know what's good for you, you'd better find a way to send Ray back to his planet." Ataru stared into the distance. There was Ray, surrounded by smiling faces, admiring girls, completely oblivious to the chaos he was causing. Ataru clenched his teeth. "Believe me, either Ray leaves, or I'm the one who's going to disappear from Tomobiki." Scene 5, that afternoon. Ataru dragged himself home, completely exhausted. His school uniform was still torn from yesterday's beating, and he grumbled under his breath as he dropped his school bag by the front door. As he passed the kitchen, he found his mother cheerfully humming to herself while stirring a large pot with a bright smile on her face. Ataru took a deep breath. "Mom!" Mrs. Moriboshi looked up. "What is it, Ataru? How can you keep letting that useless guy live here?" She blinked in surprise. "Ray?" "Of course, Ray. Ever since he showed up, he's done nothing but ruin my life." Ataru began pacing back and forth across the kitchen. "He stole Shinobu from me. He empties the refrigerator every single day. He spends all his time wandering around Tomobiki. And every girl in town is in love with him." Mrs. Moriboshi folded her arms thoughtfully. She remained silent for a few moments. Finally, she nodded. "You know, you're right about one thing." Ataru's face immediately brightened. "Finally, he can't keep wasting every day doing nothing. A young man his age should be studying." Ataru let out a sigh of relief. "Exactly. But," Mrs. Moriboshi continued, "tomorrow morning we'll go speak with the principal at Tomobiki High. We'll enroll Ray in your class." Ataru's face froze. "What? That way he'll be able to study, make friends, and grow into a fine young man." "Mom, that wasn't what I meant at all." Mrs. Moriboshi raised the wooden ladle like a judge delivering her final verdict. "That's enough. It's decided." Ataru slowly lowered his head. "You always manage to understand the exact opposite of what I'm trying to say." The following morning, Mr. Onsen was once again repeating the exact same sentence from the English textbook, for what had to be the 5th time. "Repeat after me." "This is a pen." The class echoed the words with obvious exhaustion. "This is a pen." Ataru, sitting in the back row, could barely keep his eyes open. He still hadn't recovered from the conversation he'd had the night before. Suddenly, the classroom door slid open. Mr. Onsen fell silent. Standing behind him was the principal, accompanied by two officials from the Ministry of Education. The students immediately began whispering. "What's going on? Are they inspecting the school?" The principal cleared his throat. "Students, it is my pleasure to introduce our newest exchange student." Every eye turned toward the doorway. A very tall young man calmly walked into the classroom. He stood nearly 6 feet, 5 inches tall. He wore Tomobiki High's navy blue school uniform flawlessly. His jade green hair shimmered beneath the classroom lights. His deep blue eyes slowly swept across the room with the same innocent expression as always. Barely visible through his hair, 2 small horns made it unmistakably clear. He was no ordinary student. For several seconds, the classroom was completely silent. Then one of the girls sighed dreamily. "He's gorgeous." As though they'd all received an invisible signal, every girl in the room began whispering excitedly, "He's so handsome! He looks like a movie star. He's from Lum's planet." The boys, meanwhile, slowly lowered their heads. "Here we go again." A chill ran down Ataru's spine. "No, it can't be." Rai smiled with his usual gentle expression, then gave everyone a small wave. "Hello." Half the girls enthusiastically waved back. The principal continued, "His name is Rai. Starting today, he'll be one of your classmates." Ataru slowly rose to his feet. With a trembling finger, he pointed directly at the enormous Oni. "Him?" The principal smiled. "That's right, Moriboshi. I hope you'll help him adjust to life here." Ataru opened his mouth to protest, but not a single word came out. His eyes rolled back, and he collapsed flat on his back. The entire class turned toward him. Mr. Onsen let out a tired sigh. "Moriboshi, we haven't even been in class for 5 minutes." The girls had already forgotten Ataru. They immediately surrounded Rai. "Where are you going to sit? Do you want us to show you around the school? Do you need help with your Japanese?" Rai simply smiled. "Thank you." Meanwhile, Ataru remained sprawled across the classroom floor, utterly defeated, and no one seemed to notice he was still lying there. The days passed, and to Ataru's everlasting misery, Rai excelled at absolutely everything. On the running track, the starting pistol had barely fired before Rai crossed the finish line several meters ahead of everyone else. The girls erupted into applause. "Amazing! He's so fast!" Rai simply smiled. Food. During swimming class, he cut through the water like a fish. The coach blew his whistle over and over again. New school record. Rai climbed out of the pool, shook the water from his hair, and smiled. Lunch. During rugby practice, 3 opponents tried to stop him at once. It was completely useless. Rai kept charging forward with the ball, as though they weren't even there. The coach raised both arms. "Outstanding! Starting today, you're the team captain." Rai gave a small nod. After eating. Then came the javelin throw. The spear vanished so far into the distance, it almost disappeared beyond the horizon. Everyone stood frozen. The official measured the distance, once, 3 times. Finally, he raised the flag. New record! Once again, thunderous applause echoed across the school grounds. Week after week, Tomobiki High began winning competitions it had never dreamed of winning before. New athletic uniforms arrived, better training equipment, invitations to regional tournaments. Then came reporters, photographers, trophies, medals, awards, recognition. And through it all, Rai remained exactly the same. Every time a competition ended, the very first thing he asked was, "Food?" Then he'd smile with that same innocent expression. He never seemed to understand why everyone kept congratulating him, much less why so many girls kept chasing after him. To Rai, it was all a complete mystery. The only thing that truly mattered was that after every tournament, there was always plenty to eat waiting for him. Scene 5, continued. Several weeks later, when classes ended for the day, Ataru dragged himself back home once again. It had been yet another endless day. The girls talked about nothing but Rai. The teachers never stopped praising him, and the boys looked at him with a mixture of admiration and jealousy. Ataru slid open the door to his room and froze. What? His bedroom looked more like a warehouse than a place to sleep. The floor was buried beneath towering stacks of chocolate boxes, every brand imaginable. Stuffed animals, bouquets of flowers, perfumed love letters tied with colorful ribbons, cards covered in little hearts and piled neatly against one wall, dozens of trophies, Gold cups, medals, plaques of recognition. Right in the middle of that unbelievable mess, Ray was peacefully relaxing on Ataru's futon. A huge box of chocolates rested on his lap. He happily popped one piece after another into his mouth. Ataru slowly picked up an enormous golden trophy. And this? Ray barely looked up. Track. Who gave it to you? School. Ataru grabbed another trophy. And this one? Club. Then he picked up a medal. And this? Javelin. Ataru closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Ray, do you even know what any of these things actually mean? The giant Oni paused for a moment. He looked at the trophy, then at the medal, then back at Ataru. Finally, with complete honesty, I don't know. Ataru blinked. You don't know? Ray shook his head. No. Ataru pointed toward the mountain of awards. Then why are you keeping all of them? Ray smiled as naturally as ever. They're pretty. And as though that answered everything, he casually popped another chocolate into his mouth. Ataru slowly looked around the room once more. The love letters, the stuffed animals, the flowers, the trophies, the chocolates, and Ray, happily eating in the middle of it all without a single care in the world. Ataru slowly dropped to his knees. He doesn't even understand why everyone keeps giving him awards. Ray kindly held out a box of chocolates. Eat. Ataru slowly looked up at him. They stared at each other for a few seconds. Then Ataru let out one long, utterly defeated sigh. Thanks. I think. I've already had my fill of misery. Hatch Scene 6. The very next morning, Mr. Onsen walked into the classroom carrying a thick stack of graded exams under one arm. Without saying a word, he began handing them out one by one. Megain, 84. Shinobu, 91. The papers passed quietly from desk to desk. Finally, he stopped beside Ataru's seat. Moriboshi, 32. Ataru let his head fall onto his desk. Again, he barely had the strength to pick up his test. Then, he glanced up. A few rows ahead, Rai was calmly looking over his own exam with his usual peaceful expression. A faint smile spread across Ataru's face. At least this time, I won't be the worst. He waited until Ray looked away, then quietly slipped out of his seat, snatched the exam from Rai's hands, and started reading it. His smile vanished instantly. The answers were a complete disaster. Random X's, circles, crooked lines. There was even a little doodle in one corner of the page. Ataru's eyes widened. Slowly, he looked at the cover sheet, 100 points, for several long seconds. He couldn't even react. Then, he charged straight toward the teacher's desk. Sir! This is impossible. Mr. Onsen slowly raised his eyes. What is it now, Moriboshi? Ataru waved the test paper in front of the entire class. He answered with complete nonsense. He didn't even write actual words. It's nothing but scribbles. Mr. Onsen calmly took the exam, looked it over for a moment, then quietly handed it back to Ray. Moriboshi. Ever since Ray transferred to this school, Tomobiki High has won championships we had never won before. Thanks to him, we've received new athletic funding, sponsorships, and national recognition. He paused briefly. The entire classroom fell silent. I trust you understand that we have a very strong interest in keeping him enrolled here. Ataru began trembling. What are you saying? Mr. Onsen answered with complete calm. And there's something else. If your parents hadn't welcomed Ray into your home, he probably would have returned to his own planet by now. So, in a way, you've contributed to all of this as well. Ataru stood completely petrified. Mr. Onsen smiled ever so slightly. You could say, for the first time in your life, you've actually done something useful for this school. The entire classroom exploded with laughter. Ataru felt as though his whole world had just collapsed. At the back of the room, Megain, Perm, Chibi, and Kakugari stood with their arms folded. All four smiled at exactly the same time. Ataru swallowed nervously. Oh no. After school, a nearby alleyway once again echoed with desperate screams. Wait! This isn't my fault! Go talk to Ray! A massive cloud of dust swallowed the alley. The sounds of punches, kicks, groans, and agonized cries filled the air. When the dust finally settled, Ataru lay face down on the ground. His school uniform had been torn to shreds. His body was covered in bruises. He could barely lift one arm. Then, a soft laugh broke the silence. From the branches of a nearby tree, Lum floated gently among the leaves, swaying back and forth with a thoroughly satisfied smile. Looks like today wasn't your lucky day either. Darling? Ataru barely managed to raise his head. Still dizzy, his eyes drifted upward almost by instinct, until they settled on Lum's long, slender legs. Lum followed his gaze. She blinked. Oh! Immediately, she grabbed the hem of her tiger-striped bikini with both hands. Pervert! Laughing, she floated several feet higher into the air. Ataru slowly let his head fall back onto the ground. Not even half dead! And I still can't stay out of trouble! Lum's cheerful laughter gradually faded among the branches as the evening sun slowly began to set over Tomobiki. Scene 6 that afternoon. His school uniform hanging in tatters, his body covered with bruises, wrapped in bandages from head to toe, and barely able to stay on his feet. Ataru painfully dragged himself down the hallway at Tomobiki High. Every single step was agony. At the end of the corridor, a simple sign hung above a door. School infirmary. Using what little strength he had left, Ataru pushed the door open. Is anyone here? Inside, the stunning school nurse, Sakura, was quietly going through a stack of medical files. Tall, elegant, and so breathtakingly beautiful that more than one student regularly faked headaches just to visit her office. Without looking up from her paperwork, she spoke in her usual indifferent tone. What is it this time, Ataru? Don't tell me you're pretending to be sick again, just so you can peek under my skirt. Ataru barely managed to raise one hand. I don't even have the strength. Sakura finally looked up. This time, her eyes widened. Huh? Ataru was a complete wreck. His uniform was shredded. His face was covered with bruises. And he walked like someone who had barely survived a stampede. The teasing smile disappeared from Sakura's face instantly. She hurried over and caught him before he collapsed. What on earth happened to you? A few minutes later, Ataru lay resting on one of the infirmary beds. Sakura carefully cleaned his wounds with cotton soaked in iodine. Every touch made him flinch. Ow. A little more gently. If you're still alive, it's because I am being gentle. She finished wrapping one of his arms with fresh bandages, then looked at him with genuine curiosity. All right, now tell me everything. Ataru let out a long, exhausted sigh. You have no idea what kind of hell my life has become ever since those two aliens showed up. And so, he told her everything. About Rei, about the endless food, his mother's obsession, Shinobu, the beatings from Lum's gang, his teachers, the scholarships, his terrible grades, everything. Sakura listened patiently until he finished. Then she smiled faintly. I see. Ataru looked at her in surprise. You do? For weeks now. We haven't received a single complaint from any of the girls saying you've been chasing them through the hallways. All the teachers have been wondering what happened to you. Ataru's shoulders slumped. I don't even have time for that anymore. These days, I'm just trying to survive. Sakura thoughtfully rested one finger against her chin. Well, Rei actually seems like a rather kind young man. Ataru nearly jumped off the bed. Kind? He's a monster! An empty-headed monster. He ruined my life. Sakura couldn't help laughing softly. Perhaps. But thanks to that empty-headed monster, this school has received more funding than at any other time in its history. The teachers haven't talked about anything else for weeks. Ataru dropped back onto the pillow with a groan. I never want to hear that story again. Silence settled over the room for a few moments. Finally, Sakura spoke calmly. I can't send Rei back to his planet, but I might be able to help you another way. Ataru lifted his head ever so slightly. How? Perhaps you're surrounded by bad spiritual energy. We could try performing a small exorcism. Ataru stared at her without much enthusiasm. At this point, I'll try anything, Sakura sighed. Although, I'll need some help. She turned toward the infirmary door. Uncle? The door slid open immediately. You called? The monk Cherry stepped inside, as though he'd been eavesdropping outside the entire time. Ataru frowned. Were you spying again? Cherry cleared his throat with exaggerated dignity. A good uncle always watches over his beloved niece. Sakura smiled with quiet resignation. Believe it or not, he still possesses a fair amount of spiritual power. Cherry slowly circled Ataru, inspecting him from head to toe. My. The infamous pervert of Tomobiki. It seems this time. You're genuinely finished. Oh, shut up, you useless old man. A short while later, the infirmary had been plunged into darkness. A circle of salt surrounded Ataru's bed. Several candles cast flickering shadows across the room. Cherry and Sakura began chanting ancient prayers. Begone, evil spirits. Begone, wicked energies. Leave this place. Outside, the wind slammed against the windows. Dark clouds swallowed the skies above Tomobiki. Lightning flashed across the heavens. Rain began pouring down in torrents. Meanwhile, in the park, Rei and Shinobu were peacefully sharing an ice cream. Rei looked up. It's raining. Shinobu took his hand. Come on, let's take shelter at the movie theater. Together, they ran laughing through the rain. Back inside the infirmary, the candles began going out. One by one, the windows rattled violently. The furniture shook. Ataru clung desperately to the examination bed. What's happening? Cherry's eyes widened. Something's coming. I can feel an enormous presence. Sakura looked toward the ceiling. It's getting closer. Suddenly, wham! A tremendous explosion shook the entire school building. All three rushed to the window. In the middle of the school courtyard, an enormous flying saucer had just landed. It was perfectly round, bright pink, and looked like an enormous cake covered with whipped cream and cherries. Cherry swallowed hard. I've summoned a demon. The hatch slowly opened. From inside stepped an extraordinarily beautiful young woman. She had soft, curly pink hair, freckles across her cheeks, a cute upturned nose, and a skin-tight pink outfit that left her arms and legs completely exposed, perfectly matching the pastel colors of her spacecraft. The young woman looked around with an embarrassed smile. Then she bowed politely. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I think I came to the wrong address. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a photograph, and held it up with an angelic smile. Could someone please tell me where I can find this boy? The photograph showed Rei, Ataru, Sakura, and Cherry. Stood completely frozen. Cherry murmured in a trembling voice, I have a very bad feeling about this. The young woman smiled sweetly once more. My name is Ran, and I'm looking for my fiancé. End of episode.